In this video, I'm going to show you some of the best ability nuke setups that completely trivialize the game even more. Not that we needed to, but hey, that's not the point. When I say ability nuke setups, one thing comes as a no-go. No weapons allowed, meaning just pure abilities. And that also means if you shoot or attack enemies with weapons to apply buffs or anything of the sort, banned. Companions are allowed, as they're there to aid for energy, survivability, and you know what companions do. Within the no weapons policy, that also includes exalted weapons. Yes, they can nuke, but still part of the weapon category, so purely ability focus. The only exceptions are abilities coded as weapons that are not weapons. What does that mean? Ask DE with their codings. I don't know, man. I will start off at the lower end and work my way up to the best setups. The lower end implies setups that are doable and valid, but don't have the biggest bang and require a bit more of a build-up, and with some inconveniences. Reminder, if you do not have the same items, the result would not be the same. You can always supplement what you don't have with a less optimal version. Alright? So, without further ado, let's start off with Nova, using her first ability to nuke. Now, hear me out. Her first ability is not moddable, however, it is coded as a weapon. So it is affected by Vigorous Swap and Arcane Arachne, and even Nourish. Go figure. The synergy of this setup is simple. Make sure enemies are primed with your fourth ability so they take 2 times the damage and cause a chain reaction explosion. And using the augment for your first ability, recast it to trigger a heat damage onslaught that triggers a viral and heat blast explosion. Now, for the cons, Arcane Arachne is needed, so you have to wall latch every 30 seconds. Not forever, just, do a little touchy-touchy with your feet and you're good to go. Unfortunately, this buff is not refreshable, so keeping an eye out for the cooldowns is going to be something you have to manage. Secondly, the first ability, Recast, has an internal cooldown, so it's not spammable, meaning there is a delay before you can blow your load on enemies. Now, taking a look at the build. Helmet is Nourish for the viral damage on your first ability and the energy multiplier. For the Archon shards, 2 casting speed shards, very important, 2 energy shards and 1 strength shards to round things out. Because you want to have a base of 200% strength, the energy shards will give you 415 max energy and a base of 214 strength. This 214 strength gives Nourish a 2.28 times energy multiplier, and that will scale even higher thanks to the arcanes. The mods, pretty simple. We got strength, duration, neutron star for the heat-seeking neutron particles, paired with Archon vitality for even more heat damage. You don't even need it ranked up. 175% range with stretch and augur reach. Archon stretch is here depending on your companion. Energy Nexus is here for additional energy regen, perfect for missions with downtime, or if you're in a group, although Equilibrium is going to be the better choice if you're solo and killing faster. The companion I'm using is the Worm Prime for negate to cleanse status effects every couple of seconds, Coolant Leak to trigger Archon Stretch, Duplex so the Sentinel can split up and tickle enemies, and Manifold Bond to lower the cooldown of Sentinel abilities. And the weapon is the Tazakor, it's innate electric and added a bit more. Onto the Immortal GAUSS. Simple setup with other issues. The build does reasonably well, but has its own flaws to boot. The build is simple, slap on Roar as the helmet, use Spectral Spirit to make her invulnerable, and any damage she herself does from weapons or abilities applies Doom, which is a debuff on enemies so they take more damage. And pair that up with her fourth ability, which does viral damage and strips armor. We're safe to say it's pretty straightforward and easy mode. And now for the cons. It's something. The augment is good and bad. Horrible base duration and has a cooldown. To run this augment well, you need a lot of duration, which sacrifices range, and you can reduce the cooldown by killing enemies. However, your damage is lower because you don't apply Doom on hit anymore, so you have to manually cast it. Yet you have low range, so it can be annoying, but manageable. Final con is terrain. Her horses are pretty dumb. Stairs are her biggest weakness. You need to be situated either on the edge and facing downwards for your horses to move down the stair path. It can get annoying. Onto the build. Roar as the helmet for the universal damage buff to multiply ability damage. 3 strength shards and 2 casting speed. The mods A lot of duration on the build. Brief Respite and Catalyzing Shield, useful when my third ability is on cooldown, and the fourth ability makes you invulnerable when I cast it. So you get iframes, and you get shields thanks to Brief Respite. Precision Intensified to boost the damage and defense shred on the fourth ability. Augur Secrets adds strength without sacrificing duration or efficiency, and the Augur set bonus helps with shield regen. Prime Flow, Equilibrium, and Energize for the energy. And my companion, the Panzer Vulpaphyla, providing health orbs for equilibrium, spreading viral, and keeping me alive if I skill issue. Moving up to GAUSS, aka Johnny Sins, the jack of all trades Warframe. It's like, what can he not do at this point? And the more impressive part of this setup is that it requires no helmet. Now, there is some sort of mechanical skill involved with this one, as it requires you to activate the third ability while you're moving with your first. This way, you can deal heat damage with Thermal Sunder, which usually consumes your red line. However, you're counteracting the drain with your Mach Rush. Okay, let me go over it slowly. Watch as I cast my Heat Thermal Sunder, and as soon as the animation starts, I immediately start activating Mach Rush. So now, you're moving and casting the Thermal Sunder, as you're also building up the red line meter. Alternate between Heat and Cold Sunder to optimize your damage as you freeze, burn, and armor strip the enemies, while you either push and pull them, depending on what element they're affected by. Now for the build. Full duration shards on GAUSS, as his fourth ability already provides him with so much insane benefits. And one of them happens to be casting speed, the only frame in the game who can do this currently. And main thing for this build is that you want to be at base strength, not under. That is very important. The mods. As you can see, it's pretty simple. Just place what's important for the build. If I were to remove Power Drift or any other strength mod, I'll be under the base strength threshold. He doesn't need Prime Surefooted because his second ability exists. 250% range with stretch, reach, and a rank 4 overextended. Not a max rank because that will reduce our strength. Rolling Guard if your second ability runs out. You can use whatever you want here at lower levels. Archon Vitality because it doubles the damage of Heat Thermal Sunder. This will affect all instances of Heat Sunder. That also includes the residual Heat Sunders left behind. Even though combining Heat and Cold triggers Blast and consumes stacks on affected enemies, the residual heat still lingers. Panzer Vulpaphyla, as the bestest boy here, will splooge viral on enemies and also save you from death. Gus doesn't need shield regen or a sentinel because of his passive. Also, you can mod his weapon with electricity to trigger Archon Stretch for you, and you can pair that up with Zeneric. Madame Glutes and no feet. We got Wisp in here with her new augment, nuking with her fourth ability. When would you ever think that would be here? Like ever. Cataclysmic Gate turns Wisp's fourth ability into a one-time cast instead of it being a channeled ability. Once released, it leaves behind a little ball that deals heat and radiation damage with guaranteed procs. Best part is your fourth ability also gains additional properties thanks to your motes. If you're affected by the red and blue mote, you gain increased damage, while the green one allows your soul gates to also proc corrosive, so you can strip armor if you want. You can have a total of 3 balls on the field. And now for the cons. This build favors a semi-camping playstyle, which isn't the best. However, Wisp is just great to have on any team and setup. And if you want to spread damage, you can use a Breed Surge for even more funny kabloomies. And now onto the build. 3 orange rad shards to increase ability damage if enemies are affected by radiation. 2 regular green shards to max out corrosive stacks to fully strip. You honestly don't have to, but it helps. And since there's no casting speed shards, you have to rely on power transfer from Matarai. And to buff the ability damage, I'll be running Roar as my helmet. The mods, you got the augment to augment the soul gate. You can run precision intensify here instead of umbral, but I want balanced strength so Roar can also benefit from it. Archon Stretch easily triggered by the electric mote, so you're chillin'. Main survivability, Wisp passive, jump, become invisible, and constant heat and electric procs from her abilities. For the companion, I'm using the naughty list just to suck in enemies towards the solar balls. And that's pretty much it. The damage queen, Mirage. Using her fourth ability, Prism, with the Augment Prism Guard, so the prism stays with you and doesn't run off somewhere. Pretty good damage, favors open tile sets so it can reach enemies in a wider area. It scales really well thanks to the rework where her fourth ability damage gets boosted by Eclipse. And no, I'm not using the pussy damage reduction form. So now, for the cons, you have to be on the move always. Do not stop moving, because if you do, enemies hit you. I showcased this build a while back and people were complaining they died, and when I asked them, were you on the move? And guess what they said? Exactly. Lesson of the day, when playing Mirage, don't stand still. Her main form of survivability is her first ability and her passive. Her first ability confuses the already stupid AI of this game, and when you move, they never know who to hit. And her passive makes her acrobatic movements even faster, so bullet jumping, dodge rolls, all of that. And take it to the next level if you have the mod Amalgam Barrel Diffusion on your secondary and the Praetos with these evolutions. Now, onto the build. 3 duration shards and 2 casting speed. The helmet is terrified to armor strip, pretty much only useful against Xmas units, otherwise everything else just dies. Only strength mod is precision intensified to boost the 4th ability damage, and molt augmented for even more strength for everything else. Otherwise everything else is self-explanatory. Companion is the Panzer, same build as always. And now we move on to NEZHA. Who would have thought that you'd ever see him on this list? Now this build did get a nerf to its range, because it used to nuke the entire map with 0 effort, but its effectiveness still remains. So with the Divine Retribution augment, any speared enemies will suffer the same status effect, and when the spear detonates, it will deal 1.5 times the status damage to the previously speared enemies. Now, how to expedite this? Run negative duration. So you spear an enemy, apply the damage over time, and boom, the spears explode to deal double the status damage. And what damage over time? Well, I don't know, guaranteed bleed procs on hits that spread thanks to the spear augments, and your companion spreading viral that multiplies the damage done to the health? I would say that's a pretty good combo right there. Now for the cons. Overguard or any status immune target. Absolute pain. Let's have a look at the build. 3 energy shards and 2 casting speed ones. Dark Verse as the helmet for the guaranteed bleed procs. The mods, as you can see, 13% duration with transient fortitude and fleeting expertise. This brings my spears down to 1.5 seconds. So impale the bums, swing with Dark Verse, and enemies go kabloomy. Also slap on a lot of range because of the massive range nerf that we got. Running the Panzer for the viral spread. And that's it. Moving up to El Dantissimo. Well, what can I say? The whole line of sight shenanigans is not going to stop him. Insane survivability with Overguard, able to scale crazy levels of damage, so the gameplay loop is really simple. You cast the 3rd ability, cast the 2nd ability, then the 4th ability to summon birds. These birds are going to make enemies weak to status damage. Then of course you follow it up with the double cast on the 3rd ability, and boom, nuke with the 4th. So now they take even more damage. It's so simple and very destructive. Nothing much else to say. Now for the cons. Line of sight with certain environments can be annoying. However, that doesn't stop him. Aside from the line of sight issue, the birds have really stupid AI. Like really dumb. And on to the build. Helminth is Roar. You know what it does. 3 strength shards, 2 casting speed. He's also using the Panzer for the viral spread and Archon stretch gaming. For the mods, a lot of strength, especially boosting his 4th ability with Precision Intensify. The final verse status damage is a whopping 12.12 times damage at base, which scales up a bit more thanks to Molt Augmented. And everything else is, self-explanatory. And a little step higher, we get XAKU. The reason XAKU is above because he's a bit more brain dead to play, and the game almost plays for you. His 2nd ability steals enemies' guns and turns them into his own personal turrets that scale with enemies' level. They have a duration, but his 4th can pause the duration of the vanilla abilities. And while the 4th is active, his evasion increases, so it's a chance to get hit less. His 3rd ability, Gaze, ensnares an enemy and strips the defenses of anything that enters its radius. Now, for the cons. The guns have a very stupid AI. And don't focus on the things that you want to be focused. Imagine a schizo who has ADHD and is high on some fancy white powder, if you know what I'm saying. That's how erratic these guns can be. And the fire rate is a tad too slow. Don't worry, the guns end up feeling even more potent at higher levels, as they scale with enemy level. However, for that to be effective, you need to let the duration run out on the 2nd ability, so then you can steal new guns. That's the only problem. There's no snapshotting. Now for the build. The helmet is Roar. You know what it does. 2 casting speed shards, and he's supposed to have 3 red shards here for strength, but I stole those and put them on another Warframe. Otherwise, the mods are as follows. Bunch of strength, range, and energy management. Efficiency isn't an issue, as I'm not spamming abilities. For the companions, I'm using a Hound to disarm enemies to aid XAKU's evasion and trigger Archon stretch, and a simple weapon build. And now for the best all-rounder nuking setup that requires zero, like literal zero brain cells. Save a Goth. And all of this is possible thanks to the base synergy of his second and first ability, yes, in that order, the augments for both of those abilities synergizing with each other to overlap the damage synergy. You apply Sow for the debuff true damage over time, and Reap to reap the sown enemies for a big health percentage kabloomy. And thanks to the Sow augment, it spreads the effect of Sow to nearby enemies with its moddable range. The best part is that there's no limit on how many times this effect can be triggered. And guess what? Your shadows from Reap can trigger this effect, as the shadows pass through sown enemies, dealing damage and debuffs them to take more damage. So when you combine Sow and Reap, you cause a chain reaction explosion dealing true damage. The explosions are locked off at 4 meters with no damage fall off. But there's a way to spread this and have it cascade thanks to the Reap augment. Ignore the first part and focus on the second part of the augment. Killing enemies creates a new shadow, and these shadows count as a free Reap cast that synergizes with the already affected enemies from Sown to re-trigger the explosions, cause a massive chain reaction. Now for the cons. Highly dependent on a large group of enemies. Low enemy count missions are where this build becomes very mid. And of course the reliance on 2 augments for the build to function. Otherwise, this frame is pretty useless. Now for the build. Roar as the helmet, 3 strength, 2 casting speed shards. Simple setup with precision intensify to buff Roar so I do more damage with his 2 abilities. And of course, the dual augments to make this build possible. And lastly, the good boy Panzer for the viral spread. And that's pretty much it, boys and gals. If you think I missed a frame that totally deserves to be on this list, then do leave it in the comments section, and why. And the why shouldn't be, oh, because I like it and I feel, stop right there. No feelings, just logic. However, if you did find this video enjoyable and helpful, please do feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace. Bye-bye now.